The Pear That Refused to Ripen. Chapter 1: Arrival. The pear arrived on a Tuesday, though the day itself held little meaning in the wooden bowl that would become its home. It was a firm thing, green and smooth, with a slight dimple near its stem where a thumb had perhaps pressed too firmly at the market. The bowl itself was oak, or perhaps maple. These distinctions matter little to fruit, and it curved gently upward at the sides, cradling its temporary inhabitants with a certain indifference. A human hand placed the pear with care among the other fruits. There were 3 apples, one red, one green, one somewhere in between, and 2 bananas whose yellow was interrupted by small brown spots like islands on a painted sea. A lemon sat in the corner, its brightness almost aggressive in the afternoon light that fell through the kitchen window. The pear, settling into its new surroundings, made a decision then, though no one heard it. It would not ripen. This was not a choice made in defiance or rebellion, but rather a simple fact that emerged from the pear's essential pearness, the way water decides to be wet. Time in the fruit bowl moved differently than in the broader world. Minutes stretched like pulled taffy, hours compressed into moments of light changing on the kitchen counter. The bowl sat on a table of similar wood, near a window that offered glimpses of a garden where other fruits still hung from their branches, connected to their source. The pear felt the gentle weight of existence press against its skin. Around it, the other fruits had already begun their subtle transformations. The red apple's shine had dulled ever so slightly. The banana's spots had grown just a fraction wider. The lemon remained unchanged, but lemons always seemed to exist outside the normal progressions of fruit time. Evening arrived, and with it a different quality of light, softer, amber-tinted, casting longer shadows across the wooden surface. The kitchen grew quiet. A clock somewhere marked seconds with a tick that seemed to echo in the stillness. The pear remained awake, if fruit can be said to wake or sleep, conscious of its own greenness, its own firmness. A draft moved through the room, perhaps from a window left slightly open, or from the passing of a person through a distant doorway. It stirred the air around the fruit bowl, carrying scents of the other fruits, the sweet suggestion of the apples, the tropical notes of the bananas, the sharp clarity of the lemon. The pear absorbed these essences but remained unchanged. Night came eventually, as it always does. Darkness filled the kitchen like water in a basin, slowly rising until it covered everything. The fruits were visible only as shapes, suggestions of form against the deeper shadows of the bowl. In this darkness, the pear's decision seemed more profound somehow. Not to ripen was to resist the most natural progression, the very purpose of fruithood. Yet the pear felt no conflict about its choice. There was a certain peace in remaining as one is, in refusing the soft surrender to time. The night deepened. The other fruits dreamed fruit dreams of orchards and sunshine and the quiet dignity of growing. The pear did not dream. It simply was, green and firm in the darkness, waiting for a morning that would find it unchanged. Chapter 2: The Fruits React. Morning arrived in fractional increments of light. First, a grayness that barely distinguished itself from night, then a pale blueness that gradually warmed to gold. The kitchen reappeared from darkness, the sink, the stove, the refrigerator with its occasional mechanical sighs. The wooden fruit bowl emerged into visibility once more, and with it, the collected residents. The red apple spoke first, its voice a soft rustle like wind through leaves. "I feel different today," it said to no one in particular. "My skin is just a touch softer than yesterday. I can feel sweetness concentrating beneath my peel." The green apple did not respond immediately. It was younger than its red companion and less given to observations about its own condition. Finally, it said, "The human fingers will press against us soon. They always do in the mornings." The bananas, who had experienced the night as a dramatic acceleration of their own transformation, now bore spots that had darkened and expanded. They spoke together in a harmony of subtle fermenting sweetness. "We are becoming more ourselves," they said. "Soon we will be perfect for eating, and then quickly after, perfect for banana bread. That is the way of things." The lemon said nothing. Lemons rarely contributed to these conversations. Their acidity extended to their temperament. The pear remained as it had been, green, firm, unmoved by the night's passage. This lack of change did not go unnoticed among its companions. "You haven't begun to soften," observed the red apple, rolling slightly to face the pear more directly. "Usually pears begin their transformation quite readily." "I have decided not to ripen," replied the pear simply. The statement hung in the morning air like mist. It was such a peculiar declaration that none of the other fruits immediately knew how to respond. Not ripening was not generally considered a choice available to fruits. It was like a river deciding not to flow downhill. "But," said the green apple eventually, "that's what we do. We ripen. Then we're eaten, or we continue ripening until we're something else entirely." "Nevertheless," said the pear, "I am remaining as I am." The bananas found this concept disturbing in a way they couldn't quite articulate. Their entire existence was defined by transformation. The journey from green to yellow to brown was the only path they had ever considered. A refusal to travel this road seemed somehow outside the natural order. "Perhaps you simply need time," they suggested kindly. "Ripening cannot be rushed, but neither can it be avoided. It will come to you." "Perhaps," said the pear, though it knew otherwise. Light moved across the kitchen floor as the sun continued its journey. A human entered, approached the bowl, and took the red apple. Fingers pressed gently against its skin, testing its ripeness. The apple departed without farewell, which was the custom among fruits. Their goodbyes were implicit in their very existence. The remaining fruits settled into a new configuration in the bowl. The absence of the red apple created a space, an emptiness that somehow emphasized the presence of those who remained. The pear felt no different than it had when placed in the bowl. Its green skin remained firm and slightly rough. It waited, unchanging, as the day continued its slow unfolding. Chapter 3: Firmness. 3 days passed, or perhaps it was 4. Time in the fruit bowl had a peculiar elasticity, moments of bright clarity when humans moved through the kitchen, followed by long stretches of nothing much at all. The green apple had been taken on what might have been Wednesday. The bananas, now thoroughly speckled with brown constellations across their yellow fields, had departed together, presumably for the aforementioned transformation into banana bread. Only the lemon, the pear, and a new arrival, a small cluster of grapes, remained in the wooden bowl. The grapes were chatty in the way of fruits that grow in communities, always whispering among themselves about minute changes in temperature or light quality. They paid little attention to their bowl companions. The pear remained exactly as it had been upon arrival. Its green skin had neither yellowed nor softened. It existed in a state of suspended animation, neither advancing toward ripeness nor retreating toward decay. This continued firmness had become notable even to the usually disinterested lemon. You remain unchanged, the lemon observed one afternoon, when the kitchen was empty of humans and filled instead with dust motes that danced in the slanting light from the window. Yes, replied the pear. I find this curious, said the lemon. I myself change very slowly. It is the nature of lemons to resist time's normal progressions, but even I have begun to yield in small ways. My skin has developed a slight give that wasn't there before. Yet you seem entirely immune to the passing days. The pear considered this. Its decision not to ripen had not been a conscious strategy so much as a simple statement of being. Yet now, hearing the lemon's words, the pear felt a quiet pride in its consistency. I am as I am, it said finally. The grapes, overhearing this exchange, broke from their private discussions to contribute their collective perspective. But surely, they said, their voices a gentle chorus, you feel the changes within. Even as we appear the same on our stems, we are developing complex sugars, our waters are becoming sweeter, our seeds are hardening to their final form. I feel no such changes, said the pear. I am exactly as I was. The grapes found this incomprehensible and soon returned to their own conversations. The lemon, however, continued to study the pear with something approaching respect. Afternoon faded into evening. A human came and took away the grapes, leaving just the lemon and the pear in the wooden bowl that suddenly seemed vastly spacious. The kitchen grew dark. Appliances hummed their mechanical lullabies. Outside the window, the garden disappeared into shadow, leaving only vague silhouettes where trees and bushes stood. The pear felt no loneliness in this diminished company. Its existence was complete in itself. It had no hunger for transformation, no desire to fulfill the usual destiny of fruits. The unchanging firmness of its flesh was not a struggle but a simple fact of its being. Morning arrived again, indistinguishable from previous mornings except for subtle shifts in where light touched the kitchen counters. The lemon had developed a small wrinkle overnight, a tiny fold in its yellow skin that hadn't been there before. It made no mention of this change, perhaps out of pride, perhaps because it considered such transformations too obvious to remark upon. The pear noticed but said nothing. There was a kindness in silence sometimes. Humans came and went throughout the day. None approached the fruit bowl. The pear and lemon sat in quiet companionship as shadows moved across the kitchen floor, measurable markers of time's passage affecting everything except the pear itself. I wonder, said the lemon when evening came again, what it feels like to remain so constant. The pear considered this question carefully before answering. It feels like being exactly what I am, it said finally. Nothing more or less. The lemon nodded, a barely perceptible movement. There is wisdom in that, it said. Night enveloped them once more. The pear remained awake in the darkness, aware of its own firmness, its own unwavering green state. Outside, the world continued its endless transformations. Inside the pear, there was only steadfastness and calm. Chapter 4: The Visit of the Dried Fig. Morning brought a surprise to the wooden bowl. Alongside the lemon, now bearing several small wrinkles like tiny roads on a yellow map, and the still unchanged pear, there appeared a dried figure. It was a curious thing, already transformed far beyond the normal progressions of fruit life. Dark and wrinkled, compact where it had once been plump, the fig had experienced a different kind of time altogether. It sat quietly in the bowl for most of the morning, acclimating perhaps to its new surroundings. The lemon regarded it with cautious curiosity. The pear, as ever, maintained its unchanging presence. Light shifted across the kitchen in its usual procession from east-facing windows toward the western wall. A clock ticked somewhere beyond the kitchen door. The refrigerator hummed, paused, then hummed again. Finally, when the kitchen had been empty of humans for at least an hour, the dried fig spoke. "You must be wondering about me," it said, its voice a papery whisper that seemed to carry the dryness of its form. "Not particularly," said the lemon, though this wasn't entirely true. "I am wondering," admitted the pear. Its curiosity was one thing that remained active despite its physical constancy. The dried fig seemed pleased by this interest. It adjusted itself slightly in the bowl, small movements that suggested an awareness of its own theatrical presence. "I have experienced transformation beyond what either of you can imagine," it said. "I was once like other fruits, juicy, fragile, bound to swift decay. Now I am something else entirely. Not alive as I once was, yet not gone either." The lemon made a small sound that might have been skepticism. "You've simply been dried," it said. "Many fruits experience this." "Not many," corrected the figure. "Some. And the process changes us in ways you cannot comprehend until you've experienced it. The slow withdrawal of moisture, the concentration of essence, the collapse of structures that once defined us, it is a kind of death and persistence simultaneously." The pear listened with interest. "And are you still becoming something else?" it asked. "Or has your transformation ended?" The dried fig seemed to consider this question deeply. There was a silence in the bowl that extended through several ticks of the distant clock. "Nothing's transformation ever truly ends," it said finally. "Even in my dried state, I continue to change, though imperceptibly to most observers. My sugars crystallize further. My skin hardens in some places, softens in others. I am still responding to the air, the light, the passage of time." The pear absorbed this information quietly. Its own refusal to ripen had not been a refusal of existence or experience, merely a decision about form. It too felt the light, the air, the peculiar emptiness of the kitchen when humans were absent. "And was it difficult?" asked the pear. "This transformation?" "Difficulty is relative," said the dried figure. "It was what it was. I surrendered to the heat, to the drawing out of my moisture. There was a moment of understanding that I would never return to my former self, and in that understanding, a kind of peace." The lemon had been listening with increasing interest, despite its initial show of indifference. Now it spoke again, its voice slightly softer than before. "And do you miss what you were?" The dried fig didn't answer immediately. A human entered the kitchen, moved to the sink, filled a glass with water, and departed again without approaching the fruit bowl. When the room was empty once more, the fig finally responded. "What would be the purpose of such missing?" it asked. "I am what I am now. Memory of juiciness serves no function except dissatisfaction." The three fruits sat with this thought as afternoon light began to take on the golden quality that preceded evening. The wooden bowl held them together in a temporary community that all knew would eventually disperse. Even the pear, unchanging as it was, understood the transient nature of this arrangement. Later, as shadows lengthened across the kitchen floor, another human came and took the dried fig from the bowl. There were no goodbyes, as was the custom among fruits. The fig was simply there, and then it wasn't. The bowl felt different in its absence, not emptier necessarily, but rearranged, as if the remaining fruits now occupied their spaces differently. "I wonder where it's going," said the lemon, breaking the silence that had fallen after the fig's departure. "To serve whatever purpose dried figs serve," replied the pear. "Perhaps in a salad, or with cheese, or simply eaten as it is." "As we all do, eventually," said the lemon. "Serve our purposes." The pear did not respond to this. Its purpose, it had decided, was not to yield to the expected patterns of ripening and consumption. Its purpose was something else, something about constancy, perhaps, or the quiet defiance of remaining unchanged in a world of endless transformation. Night came again. In the darkness, the pear's greenness was invisible, yet it remained green nonetheless. Its firmness continued, a private triumph unobserved. Beside it, the lemon released a subtle fragrance into the night air, a sign of its own continuing journey. Together yet separate, they waited for whatever the next day might bring to the wooden bowl. Chapter 5: The Lemon's Question. Days passed with the peculiar rhythm that belongs only to fruit bowls, long stretches of stillness interrupted by brief moments of human presence. The kitchen window framed different weather each day, sometimes bright sunshine that warmed the wooden bowl, sometimes gray clouds that made the light soft and diffuse. Occasionally rain tapped against the glass, a gentle percussion that the lemon and pear experienced as vibrations transmitted through the counter and into the bowl. The lemon was changing more visibly now. Its yellow skin had developed a network of fine wrinkles, and small areas had begun to harden and darken. It was not rotting. Lemons rarely rotted in the conventional sense, but rather aging in its own particular way, becoming more intensely itself. The pear remained as it had been from the beginning. Green, firm, unchanging. Its decision not to ripen had become a kind of identity, a way of being in the world that set it apart from other fruits. It did not feel pride about this difference, nor regret. It simply was as it was. One morning, when sunlight was making dust motes visible in the air between the window and the fruit bowl, the lemon spoke after hours of silence. "I have been considering something," it said, its voice slightly rougher than it had been days earlier. The pear waited. Lemons often took their time with thoughts, and rushing them served no purpose. "I have been wondering," continued the lemon, "what is the meaning of persistence?" The pear considered this. "In what sense?" "In all senses," said the lemon. "You persist in your unripened state. I persist, though changing, not yet taken from the bowl. What purpose does this persistence serve?" It was a question the pear had not considered before. Purpose was a complex concept for fruits, whose existence was generally understood in simple terms: grow, ripen, be consumed or decay. Persisting beyond or outside this cycle seemed to call for some justification. "Perhaps," said the pear after a long pause, "persistence requires no purpose beyond itself." The lemon made a small movement that might have been its version of nodding. Yet everything else in our experience suggests otherwise. The apple ripens to be eaten. The banana softens to feed. Even the dried fig transformed to serve a different kind of consumption. Purpose seems intrinsic to fruit existence. Or perhaps, suggested the pear, those are merely the purposes humans assign to us. Our actual being might encompass something else entirely. A fly entered the kitchen through a window left slightly open. It circled the room several times before discovering the fruit bowl. Then it landed briefly on the lemon, attracted perhaps by the subtle changes in its skin, before flying away again. This interruption created a natural pause in the conversation. When the lemon spoke again, its tone had shifted slightly. "I find myself changing in ways I cannot control. My skin toughens. My oils concentrate. I am becoming something that no human will want to consume in the conventional way. At most, my zest might be taken, or my juice expressed. The rest discarded." "Yes," agreed the pear. "That is the likely progression." "And yet you," continued the lemon, with no hint of accusation in its voice, "remain exactly as you were. Neither ripening toward consumption nor decaying toward dissolution. It is as if you exist outside the normal laws of fruit." The pear had no explanation for this phenomenon. Its decision not to ripen had not been accompanied by any understanding of how this would be accomplished. It had simply decided, and then it was so. "I contain the same moisture I arrived with," it said finally. "The same firmness. The same potential sweetness that has not developed. I do not know why this is possible for me and not for others." The kitchen grew quieter as afternoon deepened. A human came and opened the refrigerator, removed something, closed it again, and left without approaching the fruit bowl. The mechanical hum resumed. Time continued its imperceptible movement. "Does it require effort?" asked the lemon eventually. "This not ripening?" The pear considered this carefully. "No," it said. "No effort at all. It is simply a state of being that I have chosen." "Remarkable," said the lemon. Its wrinkles seemed more pronounced in the fading afternoon light, creating shadow patterns across its yellow surface. "To choose one's state of being." They fell silent again. The day's light gradually shifted from yellow to orange to a deep blue that preceded darkness. Neither fruit spoke as night claimed the kitchen once more. The pear felt a curious kinship with the lemon, despite their different paths. Both were witnesses to the passage of time, both somehow outside the usual patterns of fruit destiny. In the darkness, the lemon's question about the meaning of persistence remained, unanswered but present between them, a philosophical puzzle with no clear resolution. The pair felt no urgency to solve it. Some questions, it had learned, were valuable precisely because they remained open, creating space for contemplation rather than closure. Morning arrived again, indistinguishable from countless mornings before. The kitchen emerged from darkness. The wooden bowl held just the two of them now, the wrinkled lemon and the perpetually firm pear, separate yet connected by proximity and shared experience. "I think," said the lemon when sunlight once again filled the room, "that persistence might be its own meaning." The pear, if it could have smiled, might have done so. "Yes," it agreed simply. "Perhaps it is." Chapter 6: Becoming the Table. On what might have been the 10th day, or perhaps the 12th, time had become increasingly fluid in the pair's perception. Something unusual began to happen. The pear, still green and firm as ever, started to experience a curious sensation of expansion. Not physical growth, exactly, but a broadening of awareness that was difficult to categorize or explain. It began with the wooden bowl. Where before the pear had felt distinct from its container, now the boundary between pear self and bowl other seemed less definite. The grain of the wood, the subtle curve of the bowl's interior, the slight unevenness of its rim, these became as familiar to the pear as its own stem and skin. The lemon noticed a change, though not the exact nature of it. "You seem different today," it observed during one of the long afternoon silences that had become their shared habit. "I am the same," said the pear, which was both true and not true. Its physical form remained unchanged, but its sense of self had begun to shift. "Though I am experiencing the bowl differently." The lemon, now significantly wrinkled and beginning to dry in patches, made a small sound of interest. "How so?" The pear struggled to articulate this new state. "It is as if the bowl is not entirely separate from me. As if we share something essential." "Curious," said the lemon, without judgment. Its own transformations had perhaps prepared it to accept unusual developments without alarm. As evening approached, the sensation expanded further. Now the pair felt a connection not just to the bowl but to the table beneath it. The solid woodenness of the table, its steady presence, its horizontal expanse, became somehow incorporated into the pair's experience. The table's weight upon the floor, its relationship to gravity, its years of existing in this kitchen space, all became accessible to the pair's awareness. Night came, and with it a deepening of this phenomenon. In darkness, without visual distinctions to reinforce separateness, the pair's sense of expanded identity grew stronger. It wasn't becoming the table, exactly, nor the bowl. Both remained distinct entities with their own existences, but rather the pair was experiencing a dissolution of the boundaries that had previously seemed so definite. Morning brought a human to the kitchen. This one was taller than others who had passed through, with gray hair and movements that suggested age. The human approached the fruit bowl, looked down at its two remaining occupants, and reached for the lemon. "Finally going to use you," the human murmured, words that meant nothing to the fruits but whose tone conveyed a decision reached. The lemon was lifted from the bowl, carried to a cutting board, and sliced through its middle. The pear felt no distress at this development. It was, after all, the expected progression for fruits, but it did experience the lemon's departure as a kind of emptiness in the expanded field of its awareness. The bowl was now empty except for the pear. This solitude might once have felt significant, but in the pear's expanded state, it was merely another condition, neither better nor worse than companionship had been. The pear's connection to bowl and table continued to deepen throughout the day. By evening, it had extended further, incorporating an awareness of the kitchen floor, the walls with their faded yellow paint, the window that framed different weathers, the sink with its occasional dripping. The kitchen itself became a kind of extended body for the pear, while its actual pear form remained unchanged, green, firm, unwrinkled, unripened. It was as if the pear's decision not to transform physically had opened a different pathway for change, not of substance but of consciousness. Night fell again. In the darkness, the pear's awareness expanded still further, beyond the confines of the kitchen to include the adjacent rooms, spaces it had never directly perceived but somehow now knew. A living room with a sofa whose springs had begun to wear, a small bedroom where the tall human with gray hair slept, a bathroom with tiles that needed rerouting. The house breathed around the pear, settling into its foundations as temperatures dropped with nightfall. Pipes occasionally made small pinging sounds as water moved through them. Outside, beyond walls the pear had never seen but now somehow sensed, trees stood in a garden, their leaves moving slightly in a night breeze. Morning came. The gray-haired human entered the kitchen, glanced at the fruit bowl containing only the single unchanging pear, but did not approach. Coffee was made, its aroma filling the room. Toast was prepared, eaten, the crumbs brushed into a sink. The human departed. The kitchen returned to its daytime stillness. The pear remained physically as it had always been, green, firm, potential rather than fulfillment, but its experience had transformed entirely. It was still itself, still a pear that had decided not to ripen, but it was also somehow the bowl, the table, the kitchen, the house, the garden beyond. Not in any mystical sense of oneness, but in a practical expansion of identity beyond previous limitations. Another day passed. Then another. Humans came and went. None took the pear from the bowl. It remained green and firm while everything around it continued its subtle transformations. Dust accumulated, then was wiped away. Light shifted with the seasons. The gray-haired human moved more slowly through the kitchen routines. The pear did not question this expanded state of being. It simply experienced it, with the same quiet acceptance it had brought to its decision not to ripen. There was no urgency in this new awareness, no need to communicate it or understand it fully. It simply was, as the pear simply was, as the kitchen and house and garden simply were. Time continued its flow, meaningless and essential simultaneously. Chapter 7: The Still Green Shape. Winter arrived. The kitchen window now framed bare branches instead of leafy ones, and occasionally snow dusted the glass before melting away. Inside, the temperature fluctuated as heating systems cycled on and off. The wooden bowl sat on the wooden table, containing a single green pear that had refused to ripen, refused to decay, refused to follow the expected trajectories of fruit existence. The pear had become a fixture in the kitchen, so unchanging that the humans who passed through hardly noticed it anymore. It was simply there, a still green shape in a wooden bowl, as consistent as the refrigerator's hum or the tick of the wall clock. Only the gray-haired human sometimes paused beside the fruit bowl, looking down at the pear with an expression that might have been curiosity or perhaps recognition of a kindred persistence. Time for the pear had become something entirely different from the linear progression most beings experienced. It existed in a continuous present that somehow contained past and future simultaneously. The expanded awareness that had begun with the bowl and table now encompassed the entire house and garden, and occasionally stretched further to include the street beyond, the neighborhood, the slow rhythms of the small town around it. Yet despite this expanded consciousness, the pear remained exactly what it had always been: green, firm, potential sweetness never developed, a fruit suspended in a state of permanent becoming rather than being. Its physical constancy was a kind of miracle, unnoticed by most but occasionally remarked upon by the gray-haired human who would sometimes mutter, "Strangest pear I've ever seen," before going about the day's routines. Winter deepened. The kitchen was often dark now, daylight arriving late and departing early. The pear's awareness adjusted to these new rhythms, finding in darkness a different quality of perception, less visual, more attuned to vibrations, temperatures, the subtle movements of air currents through the house. Its green skin remained unchanged, though now more often illuminated by electric light than by sunshine. One particularly cold morning, the gray-haired human entered the kitchen wearing what the pear somehow knew was a birthday hat, a cone-shaped paper thing with an elastic strap. Another human followed, younger but with similar features, carrying a small cake with a single candle. There was singing, laughter, the ceremonial cutting of cake. None of this had meaning to the pear in human terms, but it registered the celebration as a kind of warmth in the expanded field of its awareness. After the younger human had departed and dishes were cleared away, the gray-haired one approached the fruit bowl. Fingers reached out and gently touched the pear's green skin, testing its firmness with evident surprise. "Still perfect," the human murmured. "After all this time." The pear, of course, did not respond, though it experienced the touch as a brief intensification of its own pearness, a momentary return to the more limited awareness of its earliest days in the bowl. Then the human moved away, and the pear's expanded consciousness resumed its customary state. Days continued their procession. The pear remained in the wooden bowl, which remained on the wooden table, which remained in the kitchen, which remained in the house. Humans came and went. Seasons began their slow turn back toward spring. Through it all, the pear maintained its curious constancy, physically unchanged while its awareness expanded ever further. Sometimes now, in the deep quiet of night when the house and all its occupants slept, the pear's consciousness would extend beyond the immediate surroundings to encompass fields and forests it had never directly perceived, rivers flowing beneath winter ice, mountains standing patient against horizons, stars rotating slowly in the vast darkness above. Not in any supernatural sense, the pear remained simply a pear, but rather through a kind of deep attention that had developed in the absence of physical transformation. One particularly still night, with moonlight casting pale rectangles on the kitchen floor through windows no human had bothered to curtain, the pear experienced something approaching a realization. Its decision not to ripen, made so long ago in what seemed now like another existence entirely, had not been a refusal of change but rather an opening to a different kind of transformation. Where other fruits changed physically, growing sweet then soft then decayed, the pear had changed in awareness, expanding beyond its green skin to incorporate an ever-widening field of experience. Neither path was superior. Both were simply different expressions of the essential nature of existence, change occurring in multiple dimensions, some visible, some not. The ripened apple, the softened banana, the wrinkled lemon, the dried fig, all had followed their particular trajectories with the same validity as the pear's steadfast greenness and expanding consciousness. Morning arrived, as it always did. Sunlight, tentatively suggesting spring's approach, touched the wooden bowl and the green pear within it. The gray-haired human entered the kitchen, performed the usual morning routines, and paused once again beside the fruit bowl. "Still here," the human said softly, not touching the pear this time but simply observing it. "Still exactly the same." The pear, in its expanded awareness, perceived the human's bewilderment, the sense of encountering something outside normal experience. There was wonder in this, and perhaps a touch of fear, reactions the pear understood without judgment. Humans, like fruits, had their particular ways of experiencing and categorizing the world. The day continued. The pear remained green and firm in its wooden bowl. Its decision not to ripen held neither effort nor achievement but simply a state of being. Around it, the world transformed constantly, light shifting, dust settling, humans aging, seasons turning. The pear participated in all of it from its still center, unchanged yet infinitely connected. Time, which had once seemed a linear progression toward ripeness or decay, now revealed itself as something far more complex, a continuous present containing all possibilities simultaneously. The pear existed within this complexity with perfect simplicity, a green constancy in a wooden bowl, refusing nothing, accepting everything, ripening not in sweetness but in awareness. And so it remained, the pear that refused to ripen, the still green shape in a wooden bowl, exactly what it was and nothing else at all.